Your reactions, emotions, defenses, and patterns are not random. They are entry points into the shadow material. Through watching this video, you will learn to recognize and work with your shadow in ways that help you reconnect with yourself, respond more consciously to life situations, and help you deepen your relationships with yourself and with others, as well as live with more authenticity, embodiment, and emotional freedom. So let me begin with this. Every human has a shadow. Just like every human has a part of themselves that is illuminated and within their conscious awareness, the persona. This is what we know ourselves to be in social context. And in the lightest, brightest, most illuminated parts of you, there is this speck of darkness, maybe more than a speck. And in the darkest of the dark, within the depths of you, there is this speck of light. This may sound like it resembles the ancient yin and yang Taoist symbol, because from my lens, it most certainly does. I view the world through relationships and how things interact with each other. It's like this grand system of things where everything is interrelated. And so that means that good exists insofar as it is in relationship to bad. It's connected to bad. And the same goes for all of life's polarities. They can't exist without the other. Therefore, all of the best parts of you, the parts that you love, the parts that other people have reflected back to you that they love, they can't exist without your shadow. So that being said, your shadow it's not something to get rid of. It just is. It just exists naturally all the time. And it houses the parts of the psyche that are just outside of your conscious awareness. In particular, they actually are the parts of you that you dislike, that either you dislike or other people around you said that that's not appropriate, it's not acceptable, this is not what we do in this system, in this family system, or in your peer system. And so you repressed it. And I also want to make the distinction that not everything unconscious is necessarily associated with the shadow. So, for example, when I am happy, I'm just feeling happy, I'm in a happy state, then that means that sadness, as well as all the other parts of me, is in my unconscious. It's outside of the conscious awareness. And this happiness isn't necessarily bad unless it's masking an underlying sadness or grief or fear that feels too overwhelming to face. And so that would be your shadow. That would be the shadow material that is underneath what emotion and expression we're seeing on the surface. And I'll go into that later. So something I also really deeply believe in is that the shadow is deeply intertwined with your nervous system. And that is something I'll go into in a different video. So that being said, please take the time to subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Shadow work and all parts of the psyche is my passion, and I'm motivated to keep offering this information to the greater world. So there are two types of shadow, personal and collective. The personal shadow develops through your unique life experiences, starting in utero all the way to the present day now. And this can also include shadow material that was inherited from your family and your lineage. And the collective shadow is what we as a collective are unwilling to face. Things such as prejudice, homophobia, racism, rank, privilege, sexism, chauvinism, and all the isms that people become victims to, causing significant suffering and disconnection, and even violence between groups and cultures. And all those isms are just symptoms of the shadow. They are expressions that are on the surface that may be outside of the conscious awareness. But what I'm more concerned with is what's underneath that expression. And it tends to be great fear or pain, grief, just something unprocessed that is tender. And when it gets prodded or poked, then it comes out in these aggressive, violent ways. And at the very least, they're disconnecting ways. But what I want to cover today is ways to spot the shadow when it is activated. And so I've already alluded to this, is that the thing about the shadow is that it is usually underneath what is being expressed, which can make it a little tricky to access it sometimes. But once it clicks, all of these reactions, patterns, behaviors, what have you, that you're conditioning, you bringing your awareness to all of that becomes great grist for the mill. So, for example, if what is being expressed is aggression, there may be a large amount of sadness, fear, shame, grief, or powerlessness underneath it. And just so you know that it is totally okay to spot the shadow after it is activated. It's like noticing that you are holding a fist. The noticing is what then makes it unclenched. And eventually, you'll notice it faster and faster. So give yourself some grace. Spotting the shadow is really hard, but it is super, super worth it, guys. I'm telling you, the transformation that happens is just beautifully deep and revolutionary. And so here are the ways to spot the shadow. These are what I decided were important to name. So we have reactivity, defensiveness, feelings and emotions, shutdown and freeze, judgments and projections, aversion towards self, and dreams. I'll be going into each one of those in detail. And just so you know, a lot of this, all of this actually could have hours and hours of videos on them. So they'll just be it'll be a glaze over each topic. But I think it'll be enough to help you guys learn how to spot the shadow. So let's start with reactivity. And hear me out. I know this might seem like low-hanging fruit, but once it clicks, if it hasn't already for you, once it clicks that this is your shadow running a habituated pattern that you likely developed at a very young age, then things start to make a lot more sense and things start to really get moving. That's what shadow work's really great for, is it gets you unstuck. And I'll go into that maybe on a different one, but this is also where I see where it seems really clear that the shadow and the nervous system are deeply intertwined. The nervous system, as you know, is very automatic and responds appropriately to what it perceives in the environment. So, and I also want to say that the nervous system is plastic and malleable, but at a young age, it took on this strong patterning. What happened was danger was likely present and you froze, or you became aggressive, or you went numb, dissociated, or maybe the opposite, you developed ways of being likable by becoming nice, agreeable, funny, useful, all so that you could stay safe. No matter what, you became hyper attuned. which is too much. It means that too much was happening at that young age. And so there was danger. And now, as an adult, we come into this territory of this maladaptive behavior and these responses of reaction. And where it was super appropriate because there was danger, now there is this response to what I call perceived danger. So an example is that I have this reactive behavior that comes from the perceived dangers and implications of being in social situations. And what I found is underneath that is these fears of being disliked, rejected, or not accepted. So the behavior, the way it would express would be like this certain charm that would sway people. This comedian would come out that was very funny and gregarious. Or what would come out is this blabbering fool that just way overshares and says things that definitely were not asked for. And I would often leave these interactions feeling exhausted or ashamed for having dominated the conversation, taken the spotlight, or, like I said, just sharing way more than what was asked for. And as I've already named, is my shadow is operating underneath this reaction. The behavior was like a knee-jerk reaction, just came on just immediately. And the shadow underneath is the part of me that believes I'm not enough and that I need to perform in order to earn connection, trust, respect, or belonging. In some way here, I'm unconsciously strategizing for connection. But what's really happening is that I've lost my connection to my core. And instead of being anchored in myself, I've become immersed in a familiar survival pattern that can create pseudo-connection through an inauthentic expression of who I am. And it is exhausting to be inauthentic. And I just recently did some parts work with my therapist on this, and was really able to go all the way back to my 3-year-old self and the burden that they carried, thinking that they needed to entertain and perform in ways that, served more so the people around him than himself. And he didn't feel like it was available for him to just be whatever he was in those moments. So you could see how that could then develop throughout time into the nervous system. Social interactions mean I need to be funny so that I can get the love that I need. Yeah, so that's a big one. And we'll be moving into now defensiveness. This one has come up a lot for me in intimate relationships where we have established enough safety to defend ourselves instead of fawning in the face of conflict, which is very common for a lot of people. And defensiveness is quite literally defending something that does not want to be felt, touched, exposed, or accepted, because something underneath feels tender or vulnerable, needs to be protected. At least that's what your system has deemed. And it is absolutely necessary to defend ourselves in certain situations, especially if our character is being slandered or something is being described wildly inaccurately, or someone's attacking us. But many times what relationships actually require is a willingness to first slow down, feel, and understand what the other person is saying before immediately protecting ourselves. I say this because most of the time we aren't being physically attacked, but our nervous system responds as if we are. So, unsurprisingly, this can be incredibly difficult. If you tend to feel immediate urges to defend yourself in conflict, there's a good chance some shadow material has been activated to protect you from discomfort, pain, shame, grief, inadequacy, or vulnerability. And maybe it is simply the discomfort of accepting how we impacted another person, whether it was intentional or unintentional. That discomfort to the shadow, from the perspective of the shadow, can feel threatening. So threatening that it needs to protect it, sometimes at all costs. And the defensiveness is what I see most commonly. And it makes a lot of sense. However, defensiveness is deeply disconnecting in relationships. So begin paying attention to your automatic defenses and look at what might exist underneath them. Is there pain there? Does this situation remind you of something from your past? Is there an unmet need present? Are you resourced enough in this moment to stay open to what is happening? All right, so next are feelings and emotions. Feelings and sensations in the body tend to be a very common entry point in my shadow work sessions. When in doubt, how's the body feeling? So, it's sometimes not so obvious, like what might be going on, what direction to go, how to go deeper within. But simply just placing your awareness on your sensations in your body and sort of like fleshing that out can lead you to the core of you. And what I've seen is the body often stores the emotional material and conditioning that our conscious mind has become disconnected from. So like I alluded to, the sentence stem right now, in my body, I feel ... fill in the blank. And that can be usually more than enough to uncover shadow material and reconnect with parts of yourself that are operating outside of your awareness, your conscious awareness. So feelings in our body, such as like a tight chest or tight stomach, or even to get even crazier, there's like this feeling I have in my body commonly of like feeling like I'm spinning. And what that often leads us toward is emotions. The tight chest can commonly indicate fear or anger. And emotions are not just isolated experiences, they exist within a much larger contextual landscape. Emotions tend to include all the whole story around everything, the characters that did that thing, and just like the reactions, and it can include so much. So this work asks us to become curious about that entire landscape. Therefore, nothing that arises should be rejected, dismissed, or excluded, at least not immediately. Tends to mean that whatever is arising needs your awareness. So in terms of locating shadow material, it requires us to move toward the feelings and emotions instead of away from them, which, believe it or not, is the norm. That's what we learn to do. Everything we do, the reaction, all the things that we do, our behaviors, are so that we can not feel what we're feeling in our body. And it's super effective. So we not only want to experience and place our awareness on what is obvious on the surface, whether it be tightness in my forehead or anger that I'm feeling, but we should also stride to stay with the experience as long as possible, long enough to discover what may exist underneath it. That's when we start to get into the shadow realm. This might sound obscure or esoteric, and honestly, that's correct. It's because it is a skill that develops through practicing this for a long time. And it's deep self-inquiry. It's this work that must be consistently tended to, whether it be a group that you attend, or it's a skilled therapist, coach, or facilitator. No matter what, it's essentially like going to the gym. And so when the body, the nervous system, and emotions, and the mind begin connecting with one another, things become much clearer, and shadow elements become easier to recognize and work with. The next thing is shut down and freeze. This is super, super common, especially for nice guys. And if you've heard that term or you haven't heard that term before, please look into the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. It's amazing. And I mostly refer to that because I grew up as a male and experienced that conditioning. This shutdown mechanism is a way to protect something. And it may have worked really well when you were a child, where you developed this shutdown and freeze tendency. But as an adult, in adult relationships and just relationships at all in life, it can be really limiting and disconnecting. And like ice, it is stuck, it is frozen. And it just doesn't move unless we work with it, unless we generate life into the system. So I was a chronic freezer in the face of conflict, fear, or emotionally overwhelming situations. And for some reason, my nervous system decided this was one of my best strategies for survival. It's kind of a mystery still to me of why it went that way, because other nervous systems can go the opposite, and that would be fight. But mine didn't. I went to freeze. And it may have to do mostly with my family system. But part of my work, like probably the biggest part of my work actually, has been recognizing the freeze response and intentionally generating life force into my system so that I can stay connected to my body, myself, connected to the person I'm in relationship with, and therefore respond differently. Usually this generating life force sometimes it's just as simple as taking a deep breath and exhaling. And that works a lot of the time, actually. I mean, I've been working with it a long time, but what I've seen come forth when I recognize the freeze response, catch it, and decide to respond differently, what I see is me having the ability to speak my truth, express the appropriate emotion, act courageously, and move with grounded intention, all while staying connected to my heart. So that's important there. When you are expressing the appropriate emotion, can you do so while staying connected to your heart? I think the hardest emotion that usually means you're not connected to your heart is anger. That's the most challenging one for a lot of us. But there's often a core wound or a series of experiences that both shape the nervous system and contributed to the development of the shadow. So in my case here, the shadow is tied to an inner child who learned to shut down because emotions did not feel safe to express or move through. That younger part needs tending in those moments. At least that's what I found. It is hurt, it is triggered. It wants to cry, it wants to shut down, it wants to isolate, and it needs reassurance that it's safe. And it's in control at that moment. Literally, I am it in that moment. That freeze is me. But it's not me. It's not my capital M me, my capital S self. That is the inner child that has been given the wheel to drive. But what I need from it is to let go of that control and trust. If I've done enough work with relating to this inner child, that there's trust there, that the adult self, me, has the capacity to handle what is happening, even if it is difficult and scary. So that's freeze and shutdown. On to everybody's favorite, judgments and projections. We hear this a lot in the field because people seem to be projecting onto others that they're being projected onto. It's a weird conundrum. It's a weird paradox, but we have to be very, very careful about saying that somebody's projecting onto you. We got to be really clear about what that means. And so we need to recognize that, like judgments and projections are usually indicating some shadow element of you. It's relating to it. So it is one of the easiest ways to spot your shadow at play. But it does not necessarily mean your judgments or perceptions are wrong, maybe about another person. So, but the shift that happens is you're, instead of solely focusing on what someone else is doing, we also become super focused and curious about what is happening within us. I got an awesome example for this. I had a judgment and a projection come up recently about someone in my community. I told myself stories about them. I cast judgments. I projected motives onto them. Basically came up with this whole reason of why they were doing this thing that I just felt charge around. And maybe some of these perceptions were true. Maybe they weren't. But what became more important was recognizing what was happening inside of me. What was true was that I felt hurt because they were unavailable for connection with me. And I've been doing this a long time, so it's like pretty quickly I was able to get to that point. But I understand that could take some time, and it could take some really just like patience sitting with it for however long it takes. And it's just what I came to that felt really true in my body. I was like, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. Like I hit a core thing, and that became the entry point. So I then sat with it more deeply and realized I was carrying fears of rejection and abandonment, which I have carried that for my whole life. But even more importantly, I realized that I was actually the one making myself unavailable for connection. And when I told my partner that, she was just like, just mind blown, because it's just so ironic, right? But it was so true. When I realized that myself, I thought, yeah, I think that's right. So I needed to test this theory. So a few days later, I intentionally opened myself up instead of withdrawing after seeing this person. Yeah, I saw them, and the reaction was to look away, protect myself, and instead I maintained eye contact and felt this like sense that I can do this, I can say hi. So I said hi, and we ended up having a very friendly conversation, and actually ended up having another one that evening. Over the next few days even, we continued to have easy, sweet moments together. So afterward, as you can imagine, I felt a little silly for the projections and judgments I had created, which is usually a good sign. So I really love this one. This next one, it's aversion towards self. It's essentially judgments and introjections that are pointed towards our character, our actions, our behaviors. And the first thing that comes to mind here is the inner critic. This is when judgment becomes directed inward, like I said. And these critical voices often feel like they're ours, but many of them were actually learned from culture, family systems, school, religion, social media, peer groups, and just society at large. This is what psychology refers to as introjection. This is something I learned and was kind of had my mind blown. And a simple example that a lot of us have heard is boys don't cry. That was a belief that somebody else carried, and then they planted it into your likely very young nervous system. So, and we just carry it because it just gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced until it's just like common sense, right? Which I would love to make a video on another day. But the aversion towards self happens when you feel, express, desire, or move towards something that feels authentic. But an internal voice immediately criticizes, shames, or suppresses you in order to keep you acceptable, productive, safe, or in control. Many people even glorify their inner critic because it keeps them productive and pushing forward. But the inner critic is often like a coach from hell. Sure, it may help you achieve things, but there's no heart connected to it. No compassion, no warmth. Another part of this category is the things that we dislike about ourselves. For most of my life, I disliked my voice. Whenever someone complimented or appreciated it, I would deflect it or insist they were wrong. And through my work, I eventually realized it was not actually my voice that I disliked. It was how disconnected I was from the words I was speaking. It's a huge shift, and that's what's really beautiful about the work, the shadow work, is we create these shifts, these reframes, where it's like, wow, I thought about it like this, but now thinking about it like this gives me something that I can move forward with, some work that I can do. So grateful for that. The aversion towards my voice, because then it led me to this new path. It opened up this new path to now connecting my body with the words and the message I'm trying to spread, I'm trying to share. My body was not involved in my speech. And there's so many things I can connect to in my past that would make that seem totally understandable. As a kid, I would, in my family system, say things that, weirdly enough, were purposefully stupid, because I knew that they would get laughs. And then what I would then have reflected to me is that I am stupid, that I am dumb, that I am ditzy, which caused me to disassociate. I mean, to really disconnect from the words so that I guess could survive in that and feel okay. So once that shifted, I became able to genuinely appreciate my voice and understand why others appreciated it too. So work with your aversions towards yourself. There's often rich and meaningful material underneath them. The last thing I want to talk about are dreams. Dreams are wild. There are people who work very deeply and beautifully with dreams, and honestly, I'm still undecided on where I stand with them. I think there's tremendous value in exploring the symbols, themes, myths, and emotional landscapes within dreams, but they also remain incredibly mysterious to me. That being said, There are occasionally very obvious figures, themes, or motifs that clearly resemble shadow material and can often be translated into something you are actively working through in waking life. I do not work with dreams as heavily as some people do, but I do help people unpack them, as well as explore how they may contain useful information or insight for their path. So I know there are probably more ways to spot the shadow at play in dreams, but this is more than enough information to begin working with that. So in conclusion, this is a lot to work with, and it's really hard to spot it. I super hope you feel inclined to ask for help from your local shadow work person or maybe your therapist and say, hey, I have things that are happening underneath what is being expressed that I'm ready to explore. And in your partnerships too, just getting these reflections of like, hey, I'm seeing you act this way, but I'm feeling you here. Feeling this, like there's an avoidance here. What are you avoiding? What are you scared? What are you afraid to face? And honestly, one of the best ways to approach shadow work, especially if you're exploring it on your own, is with deep curiosity, patience, slowness, and openness toward whatever arises. I have an inner child meditation that is a really beautiful way to begin establishing a connection to those younger parts of yourself that surprisingly relate to so many of our unhealthy or undesirable behaviors, patterns, decision making, what have you. And what I want to leave you with is this quote from someone I study deeply. It's Robert Augustus Masters. He says, "When we are aware of our conditioning and not letting it drive us or dictate our direction, it cannot at such times be categorized as our shadow, because it is now out in the open, illuminated, and held in our grounded awareness." So that is the goal in shadow work, is to illuminate the dark parts of ourselves, the parts that's outside of our conscious awareness. Our consciousness is light, and we bring it on to those parts, and it can't help but shift and change. And love is also light, and when we bring our love onto these parts of ourselves that are undesirable, unwanted, maybe even hated, despised, we learn to relate to them, and we can have more space for them in our hearts, which truly love is what will save everything. It is the salve and the healer for everything. So I encourage you to shine that light on the shadow and to offer your love to it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned some things that you can take into consideration when you're out in real world situations. You can work with me one-on-one, in person or online. You can explore my offerings and who I am at moonmountainhealing.com. We can do a discovery call, discovery session, and we can really find out what it is you're bringing into the container. What would you like to work on? Can I help you with that? And whatever else. You will leave that discovery session feeling like either it's a, no, I'm okay, or it's a, yeah, let's go ahead, or maybe it's a, heck yeah, let's do it, I'm ready. Either one of those is perfectly beautiful. And in terms of just working with what I've presented here, all of these ways of spotting the shadow can become incredibly helpful for gathering the information needed to continue living a life of self-inquiry, self-reflection, embodiment, and growth. And it just gets better and better and easier each time you just try. So good luck with all that. So much love. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to Moon Mountain Healing channel. There will be more content like this. And I'll see you next time.